Imagine one day waking up with the disturbing insight that your current way of living is not really your own, that each choice you have made, all of your beliefs, and even the motivations for your might not have come from the core of your identity, instead of from the expectations, conditioning, and invisible effects of your surroundings. Consider it. How much of who you are reflects who you genuine self, considering the extent to which it is a meticulously made mask, influenced by outside forces. How frequently do you feel like you're only acting life in accordance with a socially prescribed script by your childhood or the anxieties that murmur in the back of your mind? Today, start investigating one of Carl Jung's most important revelations, the notion that life doesn't really start till you discover who you are. However, what does it mean to discover who you are? Is it only about becoming more self-aware? Or is there something more profound? A more transformative process is at work. Remain with me because, as we discover the unseen factors that influence who you are, you'll visit why most individuals never really discover who they are, as well as how to escape the ultimate insight we'll talk about, which is the most potent of all. Could change not just your self-perception, but also how you interact with the outside world. One of the pioneers of depth psychology was Carl Gustav Jung, thinker, who stepped beyond of conventional ideas of the mind to investigate the unconscious's enormous hidden domains. In contrast to many psychologists of his era, young people did not think that mental health was only about conforming to social standards. Rather, he observed psychological development as a path to personal development, transforming into one's most genuine self. However, this is the truth. Most people never go through it. They continue to be imprisoned in a reincarnation of themselves that has been influenced by outside factors. They live up to expectations, never wondering if their way of life is genuinely in line with their identity. They look to the outer world for approval, thinking that approval is the source of pleasure, achievement, or blending in, but secretly, there is a silent disturbance, the persistent feeling that something is lacking. Jung thought that the beginning of actual life, when we quit escaping ourselves. But before we discuss what it actually means, we must first comprehend in order to discover ourselves. What keeps the majority from ever doing so? From the time of our birth, we receive names and are conditioned, roles and identities that are predetermined. We learn what is and is not appropriate, what's penalized and what's rewarded. This procedure is very gradual and subtle, that we hardly ever question. We adjust and conform, and we eventually learn to repress certain aspects of ourselves that are not in line with what is expected of us. Recall your early years. Did you ever feel free to express yourself? Only to encounter rejection. Maybe you were advised to be practical, to become less overly sensitive, or that particular feelings and cravings weren't suitable. You gradually learned to conceal such aspects of yourself, to conceal them when no one was looking, and you started creating a mask as a result. Jung referred to this as the persona. The face we show the outside world is our persona. It enables us to contribute to society, to negotiate relationships and acquire approval. However, this is the issue. As we become more familiar with this mask, the more we become disconnected from who we truly are. We start to think of ourselves as the character, forgetting that there is more to it than that. Moreover, there is the opposing viewpoint. What we display to the outside world is the shadow of our persona. We conceal the shadow from it. It includes everything that we have disapproved of, or repressed inside of us. Our unspoken ambitions and our worries, our weaknesses and even our unspoken advantages. And this is where it becomes even more significant. The shadow doesn't simply vanish. It doesn't disappear, only because we don't want to look at it. Rather, it functions underneath the surface, impacting our ideas and actions, and even our feelings. The aspects of ourselves that we deny remain. They appear in ways that are unconscious, frequently as projections. Have you ever harbored a strong animosity for someone? without completely comprehending why. Ever been set off by specific actions in other people that appear to elicit a strong emotional response? Young people think that when characteristics of other people disturb us, it frequently, since we possess those exact attributes, concealed under our own shadow. However, suppose I informed you that in the shadow contains the secret to genuine self-discovery, that the aspects of you've neglected and repressed are not adversaries of yours. Instead, the fragments of your wholeness that are absent. This was one of Jung's brilliant insights. The goal of psychological development is not to. It's about incorporating the shadow rather than removing it. It involves exploring the depths of confronting your own unconsciousness and what you have denied. Because when you open up a vast reservoir of inner strength, genuineness and liberty, the actual voyage starts here. Are you prepared to face the reality of who you are? To escape the delusions that have molded you? Because of what follows will contradict all of your assumptions. You are aware of yourself, and it will let you live a life that is wholly your own. Most people experience life thinking they are already aware of who they are. They use their name to define themselves, their work and culture, their prior encounters, but could I tell you that? You don't realize how complicated your identity is. That the person you think you are is merely a superficial construction, a small portion of a deeper truth. According to Carl Jung, each individual, a hidden realm exists, a huge and complex interior landscape, full of memories that have been forgotten, repressed feelings, unrealized potential and unacknowledged wishes. Because the secret to genuinely discovering who you are is not in creating a new persona, but in discovering what's hidden within of you. Let's pause for a moment to consider, have you ever had a profound, an inexplicable desire for something greater, feeling that you are a better version of yourself, awaiting its appearance? This is not merely a fantasy. It is your unconscious mind's voice, urging you to pursue a higher goal. Jung called this procedure individualization. According to him, genuine fulfillment comes not by fitting in with what other people think, but from incorporating every facet of who we are, the positive and negative, the dark and the light. But prior to integrating these components, we have to face them first. And the majority of folks stop here. Why? Because it's uncomfortable to face oneself. It necessitates examining certain facets of your personality that you have long disregarded. It forces you to consider your long-held ideas, confront your anxieties, and confront the internal struggles that have influenced your life. Consider how frequently we avoid silence. How frequently do we use work as a diversion, entertainment on social media, or anything preventing us from sitting by ourselves with our minds? This ongoing diversion is not coincidental. It serves as a defense mechanism, a means of preventing the more profound queries that remain the surface. But despite our best efforts to stay away from them, these hidden facets of who we are never truly gone. They appear in unexpected ways, through self-sabotage due to anxiousness, relationships that don't fulfill, or a lingering sense of confusion. Young people think that our unconscious mind is always communicating with us. However, we've learned to disregard its messages. But if we begin to pay heed, we start to observe trends and patterns. How our deepest scars affect the decisions we make. How our repressed urges influence our actions. And how our greatest fears frequently include the most important lessons. Let's look at a straightforward but effective example. Many people experience rejection anxiety throughout their lives. Fearful of rejection or condemnation, they steer clear of conflict in order to gain favor, and keep their actual ideas to themselves in order to keep peace. However, where does this fear originate? Is it truly about what other people think? Or is it the result of something more profound? Maybe an old wound or a childhood experience. An instance in which they felt invisible or unworthy. Jung would contend that fear is more than just a feeling. It is a shadowy side of who we are that hasn't been accepted completely. And until the truth is revealed, it will nonetheless exert control over one's behavior from behind the scenes. But this is the amazing part. When we eventually confront these hidden aspects of who we are, they are no longer able to control us. Think for a second what it would be like to be fearless, of judgment, to speak honestly and without fear, to make choices independent of other people's expectations, but on what really speaks to you. This is the strength of uniqueness. It's not about changing who you are. It's about becoming more authentically yourself. However, how can we start and reveal the unconscious factors that influence how we live? Young people think that of the most effective methods for gaining access to the unconscious is access through symbols, dreams, and reflection. Dreams, in his opinion, are messages from the inner self, exposing secrets regarding our mental health. Additionally, highlighted the value of artistic expression, writing about art, music, and other self-discovery mediums as means of gaining access to and incorporating the unconscious. However, this is arguably the most crucial stage. Consciousness. The instant you start doubting your own ideas, your responses, and your firmly held convictions, you've already taken the initial stages of change. The instant you quit escaping discomfort and begin to approach it curiously, you start to recover who you really are. Because this is the reality. Most people are strangers for the entirety of their lives. They adhere to the routes that have been outlined for them, never understanding that they possess the ability to select an alternative. They conceal who they really are, never understanding that their greatest power is accepting themselves for who they are. However, you don't have to be like that. You possess the ability to liberate yourself from the false beliefs that have prevented you from, to remove the layers of fear and indoctrination. Things have prevented you from living life to the fullest, to embrace the entirety of your identity, fearless and unrepentant. Also, in the following section, we're going to investigate something even deeper: the archetypes that are concealed within you. These old routines that are deeply ingrained in your mind possess the secret to realizing your full potential. What you're going to discover might permanently alter your perception of yourself. If the path to self-discovery were as easy as choosing a choice, by now, everyone would be living in perfect harmony, their actual character. But as we've observed, the procedure is much more intricate. It goes beyond simply deciding who we want to be. Finding the factors that have molded us is the goal. Confronting the aspects of ourselves that we have disowned, and incorporating them into a comprehensive, genuine identity. However, I have a query. Why are some acts appealing to us? Why do we keep making the same mistakes? Distresses or desires may follow similar patterns, even when we make an effort to modify. Carl Jung's response was groundbreaking. He thought that every human being, there are common patterns, deeply ingrained, thought influencing psychological blueprints, feelings, our actions in ways that we frequently don't completely comprehend. He referred to these trends as archetypes. Archetypes, according to Jung, are ancient group photos, kept in the collective unconscious, as he termed it, a psychological level that all people share, derived from our forefathers' experiences. Our individual identities are shaped by these archetypes, our connections, and even how we view the outside world. Consider the narratives that have been shared, the hero's journey throughout history, the dark villain, the sage mentor, the naive youngster these mythological figures portray. Literature, religion, and even our hopes. They are not only made up, they stand for psychological components that each of us possesses. And whether or not we are aware of it, these archetypes are present in our lives all the time. Think about the hero archetype, for instance. This is the aspect of yourself that yearns for meaning, that senses a call to something bigger. It is the aspect of you that aims to conquer challenges, become more resilient, and a better version of yourself. However, this paradigm is not isolated. It always has the shadow with it. The shadow, as we already spoken about, symbolizes the parts of the self that are suppressed and hidden. It is the aspect of you that houses your anxieties, your shortcomings as well as your unrealized potential. The hero in mythology has to face the shadow, frequently represented as a monster, an adversary or a formidable obstacle, prior to their actual evolution. Let's now make this a reality. Have you ever paused? When you realized that you had to alter. However, something within of you fought. A moment when you had the chance to enter a more powerful version of yourself, but with terror. You were held back by self-doubt or self-defeating. Here, the hero and the shadow are engaged in combat. You're doing the same error that most individuals do, is attempting to stifle the shadow, rather than comprehending it. However, young people think that real change occurs when the shadow is integrated, by taking lessons from it rather than dismissing it. Suppose you suffer from self-doubt, rather of disregarding it or acting as though it doesn't exist. Jung would advise you to inquire, where is the source of this self-doubt? Is it really yours? Or was it ingrained in you by prior encounters, social norms or other people's opinions? What lessons may be learned from it? Is that something you doubt? In fact, there is a secret strength, such self-reflection and humility, or the capacity to view things from several angles. When we start to perceive our difficulties as assets, but as unconscious messages, everything shifts. However, archetypes are not limited to the hero and the shadow. Numerous more forces exist within us. Each plays a unique part in forming who we are. The anima is among the strongest, and the archetype of animus. Young people think that every man has. There is a concealed feminine side, the spirit, and inside each lady, a latent macho side exists, the animus. These have nothing to do with physical gender, but regarding the equilibrium of our internal energy. The animal is a symbol for intuition, feeling, inventiveness, and a close relationship with the unconscious. The animals stand for the structure of reasoning, self-control, and assertiveness. When the balance between these two factors, when someone is out of balance, they feel whole. For instance, internal conflict occurs. An individual who refuses his anima could find it difficult to communicate their feelings, considering weakness to be vulnerability. A lady who denies her resentment could find it difficult to establish herself, uneasy about taking charge of her own life. However, once these energies are accepted, instead than being repressed, they turn into a tremendous source of power. And this brings us to one of the most crucial realities. Young people learned to discover who they are. You have to accept every aspect of who you are. The masculine and feminine light in the dark, the familiar and the unfamiliar. Personalization is not about changing into anything else. It has to do with becoming whole. However, there is still one more puzzle piece, one more insight that completes the picture. And it might be the strongest of all, since the biggest barrier to self-discovery is more than just fear, or self-doubt or outside conditioning. It's far deeper than that, something concealed in the foundation of our understanding of reality itself. And we will discover it in the next section. What you're going to hear will contradict all of your assumptions. You are aware of yourself, and it might possibly permanently alter your life. During this trip, we have investigated the unseen powers. The masks you wear shape who you are, the archetypes and the darkness you repress, impacting your ideas and actions. However, we now have to face the most profound delusion of all, the self-deception you perceive. Most people experience life, presuming that they have a stable identity, that they are not dating, constant self that evolves over time, influenced by events and recollections. However, Jung was one of many great mystics and philosophers, realized something radical. The self is a dynamic being. It is dynamic and always evolving, and much more than we've been led to think. What if you were the version of that you now identify with is merely a piece of something far more extensive? What if the individual you believe yourself to be is but one manifestation of an infinite mind? It has been changing for millennia, over the course of lifetimes, by accumulated knowledge and expertise. Jung investigated this notion using the self-concept, not the little, self-centered ego that clings to fears and labels. But your actual self, your entire identity, beyond identity delusions. And this insight is both freeing and frightening, as it implies that everything you've thought of yourself as, all the restrictions and anxieties, the narratives you tell yourself, is only a fabrication and not the whole truth. A mental framework that is transient. And the most potent fact of all is this: you are more than a single person, a solitary entity navigating life. You are a large sphere of consciousness that is interconnected, retaining the knowledge of generations inside you, the depth of the unconscious, and the possibility of change that is unimaginable. But why do we feel so constrained if this is the case? Why do we suffer? The ego is the source of uncertainty and dread. The enemy is not one's ego. It is only the area of the mind that produces a feeling of distance. That's what your inner voice says. Here are who I am and who I am not. It creates boundaries and walls, and keeps you bound by recognizable patterns. And although the ego has a function, additionally, it is the biggest barrier to self-discovery. Because in reality, you are not constrained by just one identity. You are a creature that is always changing. And the time you let go of the notion of who you believe yourself to be, you open you countless options. However, how do you go about doing this? How can one transcend the delusion of self and into the entirety of your life? Jung provided a route that calls for bravery, profound reflection, and a readiness to give up all of the things you believe to be true about yourself. Accept the unknown first. Most individuals are afraid of the unknown, due to the fact that it symbolizes uncertainty. But growth occurs in the unknown. It is the site of transformation. When you give up fighting the secrets inside of you, and instead lean curiously toward them, you start to see yourself and the world differently. Label attachment for the second release. You are more than simply your name. You are more than your work, your personality, or your past. You are beyond description. When you release inflexible identities, you make room for something bigger to appear. Third, pay attention to the unconscious. Your intuition and your dreams. Your gut feelings are not arbitrary. They are self-messages, assisting you in becoming whole. The more you pay attention, the more you'll start to spot trends, synchronicities, and clues that point you in the direction of your actual path, and ultimately give up to the process. Self-discovery is not a destination. It's not something you accomplish and then disregard. It is a continuous process, the revelation of ever deeper truth layers. And this is the final revelation. You were never really lost. You've been here forever. You already possess the self you've been looking for, expecting to be remembered all along. Thus, the decision is now yours. Will you go on? Life as a piece of your true self, confined by ingrained delusions and anxieties? Or are you going to venture into the unknown, accepting the vast, the boundless being you were destined to become? Because life doesn't really start until you discover who you are and realize the path. I appreciate you looking.